right. Is everybody there? All right. Well, thank you. For those of you who are here, happy that you're here. This is an exciting day. We have Will Barron, author of Deceived by the New Age. He was a former New Age priest, and he's with us today. He's going to share a little bit about his journey. We're going to ask him some questions and hear what he has to say. I read his book when it came out in the 90s, and it impacted me. Unfortunately, I ended up falling for something that was similar. But after reading this book again, it makes it even more important how sneaky Satan can be. And if I had been a better Bible student, then I might not have fallen for the things that I did. And Will's book is powerful, and it brings a lot of things to light that we as Christians need to know about, because there are touch points in this New Age movement that are being brought into Christianity today. So I'm going to bring Will on. And Will, I want to thank you for being here today. It's truly a blessing to have you, and looking forward to our interview for our viewers to getting to know you a little bit. So,
good to be here, Stephanie. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you. So would like to start with your entry into the New Age a little bit, that pivotal piece, which was reading a particular psychology book. Can you tell us the name of that book and what drew you to it and why you were reading it?
Yes, the name of the book was titled Stress Disease, and it was a self-help psychology book written by a psychotherapist called Peter Blythe. At that time, I was maybe 23 or 24 years old, and I had stress in my life. And the particular challenge that I had was claustrophobia. When I was in high school at the age of 16, during one morning assembly, and this was in the United Kingdom, where you have every morning an assembly for worship. During one morning assembly, I had a panic attack, and I had an asthma condition, and it was in this panic attack I was having difficulty breathing. And this breathing difficulty kind of had a domino effect in which I was just filled with fear and anxiety, thinking that I was going to collapse, that I was going to faint or something. And it was a total panic attack. I'd never, ever experienced anything like that before. And I managed to be able to control my emotions. I managed to be able to stay there, stood up in the assembly. But after the assembly, I was a changed person. Totally. It's incredible how through one panic attack, you're a different person. I now suffered from very bad claustrophobia, which is an anxiety, a fear of being in any kind of enclosed space. That means in the school classrooms, I was just totally filled with anxiety and fear. In any kind of room, or maybe on a bus, or any kind of enclosed space was giving me fear and anxiety. And it was a major challenge for me at the time. And I had general anxiety too. I was sort of nervous and irritable. Mostly it didn't show because I kept it under control, but on the inside of me, just filled with anxiety and tension. I had muscle tension inside my muscles, and I just didn't know how to deal with this. I did go to my regular doctor at the time, and he prescribed some medication that made me sleep, very sleepy, and I slept for about a week. I think I had either 1 or 2 weeks off school at the time to recover from this shock of this panic attack. And I was then returning back to school, but I was not the same person. It was difficult to be able to concentrate in the classrooms, to be able to focus, to be able to listen to what the teacher was saying. It was a real problem. And the doctor did not have me try to see a psychologist or a specialist in neurology. At that time, the social medicine was very, very limited. And I just did the best I could. And I kind of lived with this for a few years, but decided that it was interfering with my career. It was giving me challenges in my work. And I decided that I was going to try to find books to read about phobias and how to overcome them in order to have more peace in my life and in order to develop my career, which this claustrophobia was a real limitation for my career. And in the local city library, I was looking in the psychology section and I saw this book, Stress Disease. I took it from the bookshelf and never thought that this book would have a completely monumental effect upon my life and the way my life was lived. That book was written by a psychotherapist, Peter Blythe. I didn't know that he was a New Ager. I had no idea what the word New Age meant. No idea at all. And through that book, I got deeper and deeper involved in what was New Age psychology. Towards the end of the book, this author was promoting mystical healing ideas and mystical healing centers. And there was a center that was promoted in the end of the book called Health for the New Age. And it was a center, a New Age center, that was communicating the latest research in alternative healing regimens. These are the things, healing methods such as acupuncture, acupressure, mystical healing or psychic healing, energy balancing methods, Reiki, reflexology. There are many different kinds of healing methodologies out there within the New Age movement. This was promoting these, and I was motivated then to join this organization in London called Health for the New Age, to get on their mailing list and be receiving their materials that would then enable me to learn more about these alternative or non-traditional healing methods, so that I could then be healed of this claustrophobia and be then set free from something that was a major impediment in my life.
So you were on a real journey of healing. When you were given at the end of this book some options for what you perceive to be healing options. So when you went to pursue one of these, you experienced something during a reading. Can you tell us about that experience when you were there?
Yes, I was involved in the psychology movement for several years and read quite a lot of books on psychology to help overcome these limitations in my life. And I came across a book eventually. It was titled Going Sane, but it was not a book on psychiatry. It was a book written by psychologists who at one time had been professors of psychology in the department of the University of California, the Irvine campus. And these psychologists were creating a new sociological or psychology program in which they were believing if you want to be fully healthy and fully functioning in your life, you need to have a support community. And so they established a psychology community. It was actually established in Hollywood, and this community involved having personal counseling with psychologists, but especially group counseling sessions. And they organized their clients to be living as part of a community. So I decided to move to Los Angeles. I had been living in the United Kingdom at the time, and I decided to move to Los Angeles to join this psychology community. And I was a member of that community for just over a year. when the clients of that center and community that had been there a long time, they actually filed some multi-million dollar malpractice lawsuits against the founding psychologists. One of the problems was that these psychologists sometimes entered into inappropriate relationships with some of the women clients. And this is totally against the California licensing laws for psychologists and counselors. And so there was legitimate reason for filing these lawsuits. Well, within 2 days, the attorneys closed down that center. That whole community was closed down. So I now had a major problem. Here I've moved from the United Kingdom to Los Angeles, thousands of miles away. And I was hoping that this community would be a new lifestyle that would give me a much more better lifestyle than I'd been living before. For the prior 10 years of my life, I pretty much spent all evenings in the local bars, the local pubs. I was never an alcoholic, but I was a social drinker, and left that lifestyle behind. And I really felt that the lifestyle promoted by this psychology community was much better than what I lived before. And now it had all come to an end. Where was I going to go next? What was I going to do in my life next? It seemed like the psychology did help me in my life. For sure, it certainly did. I was living a more functional life. But now this had come to an end. And let me say also, during that 1 year of being a member of the psychology community, there were times inside of me where there was this emptiness inside my heart, like a depression, if you will. It wasn't experienced a lot of the time, but just sometimes I'd be maybe driving down Sunset Boulevard there in the Beverly Hills area on my way to where I lived in Hollywood, and there would be this strange emptiness inside of me. And it seemed that the psychology was not taking all of the emptiness away. There was still some emptiness inside of me. And now that I was no longer a member of this community because it had been disbanded, I was starting to feel depressed. All my dreams for this more enhanced lifestyle had suddenly come to an end. And it was like, where do I go now? What do I do now? And I had a very good job. I worked as an application engineer and as a design engineer for a company that manufactured custom-built commercial and industrial refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. It was a good job, challenging job that used my skills and abilities to their full. And I was making some engineering prints in the drawing office in that company one day. And as I was making these engineering prints, I was aware how depressed I was on the inside. I was just depressed and didn't know what to do. And I then heard a voice inside my mind speaking to me. I didn't know where the voice came from, but it said to me, "What about your soul?" It's like, here I was, depressed, didn't know what to do in life, and somehow this voice is saying, "What about your soul?" And I paid serious attention to that voice, thinking to myself, yeah, I'm pretty much at that time living a very secular lifestyle, partying and having girlfriends and going on dates and things. But I was still depressed. What about your soul? And I was then motivated to investigate the soul. And I thought, well, where can I find out about my soul? And I was motivated for whatever reason to decide to visit a psychic. I had been casually involved in the New Age at that time for maybe 5-6 years or so, and I had never had a psychic reading. I had had an astrology horoscope chart done, and I'd been a member of 2 New Age centers at that time, but I wouldn't say I was deeply involved in the New Age as what was going to happen in the future. And so I decided to have a psychic counseling session. And my first challenge was, where do I find a reputable psychic? Well, I looked in the local newspapers, especially the alternative, liberal leaning newspapers like LA Weekly or LA Reader are two publications that come to mind. And I saw an advertisement in one of these alternative lifestyle newspapers advertising a psychic fair. And I decided I would visit that psychic fair. I was not intending to have a $20, 20-minute psychic reading with some dreamy psychic. I was there just to explore the whole world of psychics and psychic readings. I was really looking for a professional psychic. And that psychic fair was held on a Sunday afternoon, and I went there. It was held in the Pacific Palisades, and it was actually held in what was a New Age center, a spiritual center. I didn't know anything about the center. It was called the Lighted Way. And when I walked in that center, there was a host seated at a desk, and she introduced herself and asked me if she could help. Asked me if she could help me and if I could be helped. And I said, yes, I'm here, but I'm not actually here for one of these 20-minute, $20 readings. I really am interested in having an in-depth psychic reading with a professional psychic. And the lady behind the desk, or the counter as it was, said, I am Muriel Isis. I am the founder and director of this center. I am a professional psychic. I'm also a licensed psychology counselor. And I noticed behind her there was a frame on the wall with a California psychology counseling license. She had a master's degree in psychology counseling. So I was encouraged by that. I thought, this lady's not some kind of dreamy, cheap mystic that is really a fake and just invents stuff for her readings. At least she has a psychology degree. And I was then, though, a little leery or concerned that this was some kind of spiritual center, because I really didn't want to get involved in any kind of cult religion, that I was afraid this center might be affiliated with some sort of cult religion. So I asked this lady, Muriel, I said, now, are you some kind of religion center? And she said, no, we are not a religion, we are spiritual. And that answer seemed to make me feel at ease. And I then arranged to have an in-depth private counseling session with Muriel Isis later that week. And that counseling session, of course, completely altered my life. Again, my life took a complete new turn and in the direction of Eastern mysticism.
Well, thank you for sharing, Will. That's quite a journey to get started. You had a lot of needs and you were looking for answers, and they were seemingly being provided by reputable people. There's someone who knew what you were looking for and provided that. And I want to apologize to the viewers. For some reason, we lost split screen today. I don't have split screen capability. And poor Will, I pipe on it every now and then because he doesn't feel alone like he's talking to himself. So I want him to be seen and heard. But if I pop on and don't say anything, it's because I'm caring for Will. So Will, tell us about that first reading. There's something that happened there that was pivotal and sent you this direction without looking back.
Well, there were a couple of things that strongly impressed me during this reading. The first thing that impressed me was that during this psychic counseling session, which lasted about an hour and a half, while I was in this dialogue with Muriel Isis, there was balls of liquid perspiration that were rolling down my face. And I constantly had to keep taking a Kleenex tissue to be wiping my forehead and my face. I mean, I'm telling you, balls of perspiration, like we were in the middle of a heat wave in the Mojave Desert or in Palm Springs, and it was a humid heat wave, and you're sweating like crazy. And yet, I didn't feel hot at all. The air conditioning was working very well in that room. I was not in any way emotionally disturbed or filled with anxiety that would cause me to sweat like that. There seemed to be some kind of energy present that was causing this very profuse perspiration to roll down my face, and I'm constantly wiping my face with these tissues. That was the first thing that I knew. This is not normal. There's some energy here that is, I don't understand what it is, but it's real. The second thing that intrigued me was the fact that Muriel Isis had incredible psychic ability. She was able to describe the character, qualities of my boss at work and people who I work with. She gave me counsel how to better organize things at work so that it was easier for me and it was more productive. She described the characters of some of the psychology founders of that psychology corporation that had been a member of. And she described some of the strengths and weaknesses of their program, and basically told me that it was time for me to move on, that there were better things ahead for me. She also described some of the New Agers that I've been involved with in a New Age center that was in the Republic of Ireland called Atlantis. I actually lived in a New Age center, even though I was not myself at that time yet deeply involved in the New Age, but I was a member of this New Age commune, and I was there again to get some psychology counsel and to have therapy to take away this claustrophobia that I was still suffering from and this anxiety. And she described the founder and director of that New Age commune called Atlantis. It was a lady called Jenny James, and described her features. She said this lady has got a very strong influence on your life, which she certainly had. She has long black hair, which Jenny James had long black hair. And I was just amazed that this psychic Muriel Isis could describe someone that she has no knowledge of at all. I was strongly impressed that this psychic ability was for real, that this lady Muriel Isis really had psychic ability. She really possessed this knowledge that she was getting from somewhere, and it was real. I was overwhelmed by it. Now, another thing that intrigued me was the fact that Muriel Isis informed me that her center was privy to teachings, mystical teachings, and if I was to attend the evening classes in that center, I would then be educated and be trained, and I would then be enabled to connect with my destiny plan for this lifestyle, or this life on planet Earth. She said that each of us has an optimal destiny plan, and what we need to do is connect with that plan so that we could, in our lifestyle, achieve the maximum amount of fulfillment, of contentment, of happiness and functionality in our lives. But we needed to connect with that destiny plan. We needed to connect with this path of the soul in order to be fulfilled. And I was intrigued by this. This is exactly what I was looking for. I thought that my happiness and my fulfillment was to be found as a member of this brand new psychology corporation and the community that it set up. And this community had about 600 members. We lived in private houses in the Hollywood area as community members, and it was a much better lifestyle than I'd lived before. But that was all gone. And here I was now feeling empty and wondering what I was going to do in my life. Where was I going to find fulfillment? And here, Muriel Isis was promising a whole body of teachings, mystical teachings, that if I followed these teachings, I would find fulfillment. I would connect with my soul, and I would achieve fulfillment in this lifestyle. And it's everything I was looking for. And she then, at the end of this psychic reading, Muriel Isis gave me brochures promoting the evening classes, the different evening classes that she offered at that New Age Center, and listed the weekend workshops that were to be had there. And so I decided to accept her invitation and to attend these evening classes. And we were studying different aspects of New Age practice. There was a class on discipleship training, which was the main class that I attended, and that was primarily the training in the practice of meditation. There was classes on astrology, classes on numerology, classes on psychic development, classes on channeling, being able to channel spirit guides. And I was intrigued by all of these classes and became a student at that center called the Lighted Way.
So with all of these options, one of the things that I think they had you do, was requirement, was to meditate, right? Can you share with us what happened during your first meditation experience?
Well, the first meditation experience was during the first class I attended at the Lighted Way. It was called the Discipleship Training class. I had no idea what kind of discipleship this involved, what it was. I had no idea. But I decided, based upon the power, the psychic power, the telepathic power that Muriel had, and she had clairvoyance and clairaudience ability. It was very obvious. She had this, what's called extrasensory perception. And so I decided to attend this first evening class that I attended, discipleship training, and all of the classes ended with the practice of Eastern meditation. And so the beginning of the class would be instruction, and then halfway through the class we would then go into the practice of Eastern meditation, and that would usually comprise about half of the class time. And during the meditation part, we rearranged the chairs into a circle. This is known as a light circle. And a candle was lit in the center of the circle. And there maybe was about 10 students in that class. And we were sat then in chairs around this candle. The lights in the room were dimmed. And this room was a beautiful room. It was a beautiful center. But when those lights were dimmed, I felt very creepy. I did not feel comfortable being in this darkness. I mean, it didn't just feel physically dark. Somehow, emotionally, it was a creepy atmosphere there, a creepy thing, being in the dark with this candle lighted in the center of the circle. But anyway, I decided, hey, I'm new to this, maybe I'll get used to it, or maybe I'll just attend a few classes and then leave and move on, because it did feel creepy. We were instructed to sit with an erect posture in our chairs, with the spine erect, and with the arms down at our sides and the hands placed on our knees, but with the palms pointing upward. This is a very traditional means of practicing Eastern Hindu meditation. we were told to sit there quietly and to initially just breathe in and out deeply and rhythmically, just to relax. Because, I was a little bit nervous being in this class. So we were told this breathing will help you to relax, to calm your mind. After doing this breathing, which in the Hindu religion is called prana or breath control, we were then instructed to use our willpower to will away conflicting thoughts in the mind. All the thinking in the mind had to be stilled or erased so that we would blank out the mind, so that the mind would be held in a state of nothingness. Now, this was very difficult for me to do at that time, this stilling of the mind, but I persevered. And as I'm sat there in this chair, all of a sudden it was as if a light bulb switched on inside my brain, inside my head, like I was filled with this light. Now, a New Ager would call this a mystical experience, and I was intrigued by it. It felt very soothing. It felt a tranquil energy. I was relaxed. Instead of being on edge and nervous, wondering what was going to happen next, I was now filled with emotional peace and was starting to enjoy this meditation. And I was just sat there, and Muriel then told us that through the practice of this meditation, which more technically is called transcendental meditation, through the practice of this Eastern meditation, we are able to connect with the higher self. The higher self was regarded to be a higher level of intelligence within your own mind, within your own brain, that you normally do not have access to. But through the persistent and consistent practice of this Eastern meditation, you will be trained and enabled to access a higher level of wisdom that you don't normally access, and that this wisdom would be of blessing in your life. It would help you in your employment. It would help you to be wiser in your work, in your general life. It would help you to make better and more wiser and more functional decisions so that you could live more successfully. This was what was taught. And this was a beginner's class for discipleship training, so we were not channeling spirit guides or channeling ascended masters, anything like that at the time. We were simply training how to access the higher self. That's what we were doing. But let me emphasize to our viewers, I don't believe that there is a higher self that you can access through transcendental meditation. I believe now that I'm a Christian, this light that switched on inside my mind and that gave me this tranquil, peaceful energy, this light, I believe, was put there by demonic spirits. I believe that present in that New Age center, there were Satan's evil angels, and that they were beaming. They have mystical powers, they have mystical energies, and they were able to give Muriel the psychic ability. I don't believe Muriel inherently was able to reach out into some cosmic consciousness and bring information about me into her mind that she would communicate with me. I believe that evil spirits, evil angels of Satan were present in that room during that psychic reading. Muriel had telepathic abilities that these evil angels had given her. They were communicating this information into her mind, either through clairvoyance or through clairaudience. Either they were speaking with an inner voice into her mind, or with the vision in what's called the third eye center, the mystical occult vision, basically. But it's all demonic. Demons were communicating all this information to Muriel. They were picturing in her mind what Jenny James looked like, the founder and director of the Atlantis New Age commune in Ireland, where I lived for several months. They were communicating to Muriel the information about my boss and people at work. They were communicating information, truthful information about the psychologist that ran that psychology center and the community that it was affiliated with. And they were these evil angels that are giving this information to the psychics. The psychics simply verbalize in a process known as channeling or mediumship. They verbalize that information, and it is a total deception. This is not coming from cosmic consciousness. It's not coming from God. It's coming from Satan and his evil angels. And so this light that switched on inside my head during the practice of that first meditation session, I believe that was put there by evil angels that were present in that room. And they were giving me this mystical experience. And that it was a deception. They were seducing me into the intriguing world of Eastern mysticism. And it is a seduction and it is a deception. And that deception went on for another 7 years before I was miraculously rescued from that terrible deception. But the last 2 years of my involvement in New Age movement was a nightmare of slavery to demonic spirits that had taken total control over my life.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you were sharing, I couldn't help but I was drawn into what you were sharing because it resonated with me. Just as Muriel told you about someone who only you would know, that happened to me with my to-be spiritual director. He told me something about my life that only I would have known. So I just see this common thread with this. And then that peace, when I was meditating or doing contemplative prayer, it felt so peaceful. I never had a light bulb experience with that coming on in my head. I just had this overwhelming sense of peace. And I thought that was the presence of Jesus, But I'm struck by the parallel between what you just shared and then my own experience with contemplative prayer. Now, you went on to say that these demons wreaked havoc with you. Can you give just a brief synopsis of what that looked like? And then I want to kind of bring us to where God starts to peel away these layers that had enshrouded you in darkness.
Let me first share with you how I came into contact with my first spirit guide, and then how that spirit guide eventually made my life a nightmare of slavery. About 1 year after attending these discipleship training classes in the Lighted Way New Age Center, one morning, just before going off to my job as an engineer, I practiced my morning meditation. I was still living in Hollywood, and I had three roommates that were close friends of mine, and I would meditate in my own bedroom. I would sit on the floor in the cross-legged position, known as the lotus position in the Hindu religion. When you see pictures of gurus and swamis and Hindu holy men practicing meditation, they usually sit in this cross-legged lotus position. There was a problem I had that morning. My back was killing me. As a child, when I was about 12 years old, I fell and I was injured my back, and my thoracic T5 vertebrae had some damage to it, and there was scar tissue there that was often giving me pain in my back. And that morning, sitting there with the spine erect, it was very uncomfortable for me. But I heard the voice of the higher self speaking into my mind. This voice of the higher self that you're trained to listen to in the occult. It speaks through the voice of conscience. It's not like a voice with a distinct accent or way of speech that speaks to you. It actually somehow takes over your voice of conscience, or it speaks through it. So this voice from my higher self is speaking to me that morning, and it's saying, Will, persist, just persist. Ignore the pain in your back, ignore the discomfort, just persist in your meditation. It's interesting, that morning was October the 31st. It was in 1981. It was Halloween day that day. And so I persisted. And as I'm sat there, I had the experience of this light bulb switching on inside my brain. Now, let me tell you, in practicing meditation, normally I did not have that experience. I had it the very first time I was meditating in that light circle, the first class in the lighted way in your center. But normally I wouldn't experience that kind of light phenomenon inside my brain. It did happen later, much more frequently, but it wasn't a common occurrence. But that morning, this electric light bulb, as if you will, switched on inside my brain, but it was very powerful. This was like a 200-watt light bulb going off, very powerful energy, and this light seemed to flood throughout the whole of my body. And this pain that I had in my back, this discomfort, just disappeared. I just didn't feel it anymore. And I felt a great sense of peace and tranquility. This energy that was filling me was a very warm energy. It felt like I was sitting on the beach. I live in Los Angeles, and we have the nice beach, the Santa Monica beach. It felt like I was sitting on the warm sand of Santa Monica Beach in the summer with the sunlight coming upon me. That's how it felt. Very soothing, tranquil energy. I actually lost all sense of weight. It felt like I was levitating off the floor. Maybe I was levitating 4 or 5 inches off the floor. I don't know. And as I'm sat there in this energy, suddenly this person stood in front of me. Now, my eyes were closed, so this was a vision experience, but it was experienced like he was really there, stood in front of me, maybe like 3 yards or 3 meters in front of me. And when I first saw him, I thought, wow, it's Jesus Christ, because he looked just like the way artists have portrayed Jesus Christ to look. If people get a copy of my book, Deceived by the New Age, they'll be able to see an artist's rendition of what this person looked like. He had a long white robe. He had long golden hair that was resting on his shoulders, and his face was beaming with radiant light. I noticed his feet seemed to be immersed in glowing metal, like red hot metal or something, like burnished bronze, glowing like it was molten metal somehow, radiating this very bright light, just like the way the appearance of Jesus is described to John the Revelator in the book of Revelation, chapter 1. John has a vision experience on the island of Patmos, and he sees Jesus appearing to him, and that is the way this lighted being appeared to me, and I thought it was Jesus Christ, because he just looked like the way artists have painted Jesus to look. But this person then communicated to me telepathically. I could see his mouth was not moving, but I could hear his voice as clearly as you hear my voice. And he communicated to me and told me that he was not Jesus Christ, that he was Djwhal Khul. I was familiar with the name Djwhal Khul from the occult books that I was studying. I was studying as a disciple of the Lighted Way New Age Center. Our main textbooks were the books written by a New Age channeler called Alice Bailey. She was a theosophist. She had been a member of the Theosophical Society, and she lived in the from around 1919 or so and onwards. She was a channeler of spirit guides, these ascended masters that Theosophy teaches about. She lived in Los Angeles. She was a member of a Theosophical Society commune called Crotona that was based in Hollywood on just off Beechwood Drive. And in these books that I'd been studying, they describe how, according to the teachings of Theosophy and the teachings that Alice Bailey, the new Theosophy teachings that Alice Bailey was introducing in her books, they describe that on planet Earth, God supposedly has 49 main agents that are called ascended masters. And they teach that Jesus Christ is one of these ascended masters. They teach that 7 of these ascended masters are the leaders amongst the masters, and Jesus is one of the 7. And they teach that one of these ascended masters is called Djwhal Khul. And Alice Bailey, who was the channeler or medium for these new theosophical teachings that she introduced, Alice Bailey claims that her personal spirit guide, who gave her these teachings that were then published in about a dozen or more books, that her personal spirit guide was Djwhal Khul. So I was familiar with who Djwhal Khul was, and Djwhal Khul here appears to me in this visionary experience in my bedroom in Hollywood on Halloween. And he then told me that he had appeared to let me know that I had been selected to be one of his personal disciples, and that if I was willing to accept this offer to be his personal disciple, he would train me for a leadership position within the New Age movement. He actually told me that I was eventually going to work for the United Nations organization, and that I was going to help bring about the New World Order, which would be a new world religion, which would be described as New Age Christianity, and that this would be affiliated with a political initiative, this new world order, a one world government based upon the authority of the United Nations organization. This was the plan that these ascended masters had. One world religion affiliated with a one world government based upon the United Nations organization. And I was, of course, delighted. I was overwhelmed by the fact that the ascended master, Djwhal Khul, would appear to me and offer me the privilege of being his disciple. And of course, I accepted the offer. Djwhal Khul then stood there silently for several more seconds. He then invited me to ask him a personal question. I could hear his voice very clearly. I asked him a question about my health. I had a health challenge at the time, and he replied to that question. He then stood there silently for several more seconds, and then in an instant he vanished. He just disappeared. And where he had been stood was just left behind this blazing sphere of light, maybe about 6, 7, 8 feet in diameter, almost like the moon. It looked like a full moon, this blazing light, like not as bright as the sun, more like the moon. And after several more seconds, maybe another 10, 15 seconds, this light gradually dissipated. And when it did, I took a deep, big breath and realized that I had not been breathing at all whilst in the presence of this ascended master. I was not breathing. And all of a sudden, I recovered the sense of weight. I think I was levitating a few inches above the floor, and I regained a sense of gravity and weight. And this discomfort that I had been feeling in my spine, in my back, returned. I started to feel this discomfort, and I'm moving my shoulders then to try to feel comfortable. Well, I realized now that I was now going to be late for work. And so I got up, terminated the meditation, got in my car and drove off to my job. There was a problem, though, trying to do my job that morning. By mid-morning, I was starting to feel very tired. And by around 11 o'clock in the morning, I was feeling absolutely exhausted. Now, some of you listening to my testimony may think, well, maybe Will Barron fell asleep and he had a very lucid dream, fell asleep while he was meditating. No, I was wide awake. I was not involved in any kind of drug taking at all. Drugs were forbidden when you were on that path at the lighted way. And what happened to me was a real visionary experience. The vision was given to me by a lighted being who I believe is not an ascended master, as the New Age movement claims. I believe he was one of Satan's angels, masquerading as an angel of light, masquerading under the identity of the so-called ascended master, Djwhal Khul. I don't believe that there are 49 ascended masters on planet Earth, as Theosophy teaches. The Theosophical Society teaches that these ascended masters are real human beings, but they have evolved themselves spiritually through many thousands of hours of practicing transcendental meditation, practicing more advanced Kundalini meditation and Kundalini yoga. I don't believe these are humans at all. In the Alice Bailey books, they teach that Djwhal Khul, I think, is something like 200 years old, if my memory is correct, but he's still living in a flesh and blood body. But through practicing mysticism, the New Age teachings claim that you can become immortal, even in this lifetime, and that these ascended masters are now immortal human beings that are God's main agents for introducing the New Age spiritual teachings to planet Earth. But I believe this is total deception. These ascended masters are in reality Satan's evil angels, masquerading as angels of light, masquerading as ascended masters. They appear in visions to New Age mystics, and they deceive them even with greater deception than what they were already deceived. But this visionary experience was real, and it involved a colossal depletion of my energy resources, and I felt so exhausted. I had to tell my boss that I was feeling sick, and I mean, I was absolutely exhausted, like the most severe kind of influenza that you would ever be infected with. You just want to collapse on your bed and just lie in bed and try to sleep or something. That's how I felt. So I told my boss I was feeling sick. I told him, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to go back to where I live and just rest. I'm just not feeling well. I can't work. And so I did. I went back to this house where I lived in Hollywood, and I collapsed on the bed from exhaustion and rested. So this was a real event. It was a real vision, but not given by God. But it was given by Satan and his evil angels. And of course, I now became a disciple of this so-called ascended master, Djwhal Khul.
Wow. And that was really just the beginning. As I was reading your book, you shared the absolute control that the Spirit had over your mind, over your life. You gave up a job. You were giving money, thousands of dollars. Every time they would ask, you would give money. And they were isolating you, removing you from people, having you move out on your own, giving up special friendships. He really demanded a lot from you. So with this kind of control, you also mentioned later in your book, when you had come out, the freedom that you began to feel.
Yes, Stephanie, I hope that on other webcasts that we'll be able to share with our viewers something about the experiences that I did experience. Of course, there's lots of them. We don't have time right now, but yes, eventually, I would say 4 years later, this would be around about 1985, my life became a nightmare of slavery. total slavery to these demonic spirits that had taken control. And it was a nightmare, absolute nightmare. And I'm so thankful that my parents, who were very dedicated Christians, were praying for me for over 16 years. And God finally saw an opportunity to intercede and rescue me from that terrible deception. And God did. It was a miracle of deliverance. And I was so thankful, and I am still so thankful that in 1987, right on my birthday, incidentally, 1987, God interceded in a miracle and rescued me from that nightmare of slavery. God just gave me a true enlightenment in which suddenly I realized that my personal spirit guide at that time, who claimed to be Jesus Christ, I actually had two different spirit guides. Up until 1985, my spirit guide was supposedly this ascended master Djwhal Khul, and then in 85 I had a new spirit guide for 2 more years who claimed to be Jesus Christ, claimed to be Jesus of Nazareth the Christ, but he was another evil angel of Satan masquerading as Jesus Christ. And it was the same slavery and bondage to these demonic spirits. And the real Jesus rescued me from that. A moment came where I had a true enlightenment while reading a Christian book, warning about New Age deception, warning about the deception of spiritualism, warning that Satan is real. I was led to that book. And a moment came when I had this massive enlightenment and realization that my personal spirit guide was not Jesus Christ. He was the other Jesus, the counterfeit Jesus, and that I had been totally deceived and I was working for Satan and his evil angels, and that this whole New Age movement is one massive, great satanic deception and plan of darkness where Satan is trying to take control over this world through this New Age spirituality movement. And I'm so glad that I'm out of that. Yes. So happy about that.
Amen. You were definitely delivered. That's hard to get out of. And so I like the fact that you mentioned you had praying parents, because intercessory prayer is so important. And I think this is a beautiful example of the power of intercessory prayer. And it moves the hand of God, as we see in your life today. I want to ask you a question. You said you had changed, or the spirit guide had changed into what you were told was Jesus. And that's when you became a New Age Christian. And when you were a New Age Christian, you were told to go and infiltrate the churches, befriend people, and bring in meditation and New Age teachings. I'm wondering, Will, do you see the evidence of that in churches today?
Absolutely, yeah. And I would love to discuss that with you on another webcast when we have time, where I see we're almost out of time. Yeah. But absolutely, what I was doing as a hardcore occultist, and yet claiming I was a follower of Jesus, what I was doing was to infiltrate regular Christian churches with the simple goal of trying to start Christian meditation in those churches as part of contemplative spirituality, part of spiritual formation. But it was the same type of meditation that I was practicing in the lighted way that we called occult meditation, transcendental meditation, Kundalini meditation. But it's the same meditation. We were now simply calling it Christian meditation. And my goal was to introduce this so-called Christian meditation into Christian churches, in which they would be able to experience, supposedly, in a more fulfilling and deeper and precise way, the power of the Holy Spirit, and that they eventually would be able to hear the voice of Jesus speaking to them. That was my mission that these evil angels were giving me. Of course, I didn't know they were evil angels, but you're absolutely right. New Age meditation, mystical, occult, Eastern meditation is the same thing as the contemplative prayer, contemplative meditation that is promoted in contemplative Christianity or spiritual formation, contemplative prayer, as they call it. It's the same thing as Eastern, mystical, occult, New Age meditation. There is no difference except the vocabulary that you use to describe it.
I like how you brought that together. There was a question I had. What would
Well,
you
I would suggest, Stephanie, that we have another session.
Okay, would you like to join us next Sunday? Or we'll schedule
Absolutely,
a date?
yes, yes,
We can schedule a date.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Next Sunday or whatever your schedule will be
Okay.
fine.
It'd
Yes.
be nice to follow up and tie a bow around this and kind of bring it together for people. But thank you for what you shared. Powerful story, and we're going to get more into your story then the next time. What the demons did to you, and then the freedom from it, and then how we can maybe determine in our own lives what is of God and what is not. But I'm so thankful for the freedom that you have now, and I have a scripture that I'd like to maybe close with, and that's 2 Corinthians 3:17. It says, "Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty." And I think that sums up the Spirit that was leading you before, and then the Spirit that's definitely leading you now. Will, would you like to tell us where we can get a copy of your book?
Yes, the book can be purchased through Amazon. All you need to type in is my name, Will with a double L, Will, and the last name Baron, Baron. Just type that into Google. You don't even have to go to Amazon. You can certainly type it into Amazon. My book will come up. It's in print in a paperback edition. You can also buy it at the Adventist Book Center. It is not stocked anymore. This book is 30 years old, but they can order it for you. It is in stock at the publisher Pacific Press.
Okay, thank you. And I just received a message that I think would be good. Maybe next time, towards the end of our interview together, we could take a few questions from our viewers. And
Yes,
yeah, I think that would be
absolutely.
great. So people, get your questions ready, and we will see you next week. And thank you for joining us. And Will, thank you. I'll work on the equipment this week, and we'll get this running. You take care.
Stephanie, are you still on Facebook Live, or are you now disconnected
I'm
from
going to
Facebook?
stop it. Oh, and
Okay.
then, okay.